On February 14th, 1933, Bumpy Johnson found himself facing odds of 12 against 1. Dutch Schultz had dispatched his most ruthless squad. Tommy the Executioner, Vento, Marty, Icepick, Delaney, plus 10 other assassins whose identities escaped even the cops. They trapped Bumpy down in the Cotton Club's basement. No onlookers, no escape route. At 27, Bumpy was still honing his skills in the underworld. Dutch ruled as New York's dominant gangster. Observers figured it would end predictably. Bumpy Johnson, lifeless, in that cellar. Yet Dutch overlooked one key detail. Bumpy Johnson operated outside everyone's playbook. 90 minutes on, just a single survivor from that dozen emerged breathing. He carried a warning that left Dutch Schultz, the killer of more than 40 souls, turning ashen. This tale recounts the evening Bumpy Johnson turned invincible. To grasp the events of that night, you must first get a feel for Harlem in 1933. The Harlem Renaissance had faded into memory. The Great Depression struck with full force. Folks were scraping by in utter need. Desperation breeds risk-taking, and gambling filled that void. The numbers racket and underground lottery pumped vitality into Harlem's veins. A mere nickel bet could yield $50. For those scraping by on weekly wages of $7, that small stake represented optimism, and optimism held real value. Dutch Schultz eyed that value hungrily. Snorts, a Bronx-born German-Jewish gangster, he'd amassed fortunes smuggling booze amid Prohibition. But, with Prohibition winding down, Dutch sought a fresh dominion. His gaze shifted southward to Harlem, where cash surged through the policy games, and he resolved to claim every cent. One obstacle stood in his path, though. Harlem already crowned its own rulers. Madame Stephanie St. Clair, the undisputed policy boss, and her protector, the rising figure, Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy set himself apart from typical enforcers. He wasn't merely a hired gun. Sharp-minded, he'd schooled himself behind bars, devouring works by Shakespeare and delving into philosophy. He grasped that true regard in Harlem stemmed not from intimidation, but from allegiance. Whenever Madame St. Clair's collectors fell victim to holdups, Bumpy retrieved the funds. When corrupt officers targeted black enterprises for payoffs, Bumpy ensured they vanished, sometimes through force, other times by dismantling their livelihoods or staining their names. Calculated and unyielding, he scorned any submission to Dutch Schultz. In January 1933, Dutch dispatched negotiators into Harlem. They met Madame St. Clair at her spot on 133rd Street. The demand rang clear: partner with Dutch, fork over protection money, or face ruin. Madame St. Clair, a self-made powerhouse from the Caribbean, who rose from scratch, eyed these intruders in her domain and ordered, "Leave." The envoys pivoted toward Bumpy, lurking in the shadows. "Better play this wise, kid." Bumpy remained still, silent, his gaze piercing. That look, the sort that prompted men to review their policies. The messengers departed, relaying the defiance to Dutch, enraged at the rejection, especially from a black woman and her guard. Dutch, unaccustomed to denial, issued the command: raze it to the ground. Begin with him. Dutch craved more than Bumpy's demise. He demanded a spectacle, a savage, overt execution to cow the rest into obedience. February 14th, 1933, Valentine's Day, a twist of fate. Given the bloodshed ahead, Bumpy received word that Dutch's crew aimed to raid Madame St. Clair's primary tally room on Lenox Avenue come first light. He ventured there unaccompanied to scout. That choice marked his initial error. Or perhaps not. Perhaps Bumpy sensed the setup awaiting him. The Cotton Club basement in question wasn't the glitzy downtown venue for white crowds. This was Harlem's authentic after-hours den, where locals gathered to imbibe, wager, and resolve grudges. The lower level served as a stockroom, stacked with booze cases, card setups, and one lone way up via a tight stairwell, an ideal ambush site. At 4:32 a.m., Bumpy made his way down. Dimness cloaked the space, save for a lone bulb dangling overhead. Then came the telltale clicks of weapons arming, 12 firearms, 12 figures materializing from the gloom. Tommy, the executioner. Vento advanced. Tommy's tally stood at 16 victims, all dispatched up close, eye to eye. He grinned. Dutch extends his compliments. Bumpy held his ground, arms relaxed, expression serene. He scanned the area methodically, registering the 12. His eyes returned to Tommy. Is that his full contingent? Tommy's grin wavered. See, Bumpy Johnson's edge lay in his understated confidence. He never posed or exaggerated. His words carried weight. So, confronting superior numbers and questioning their turnout, that wasn't empty swagger. It was assessment. You've got roughly 5 seconds to plead, Tommy warned, lifting his pistol. Bumpy cocked his head a fraction. You're erring here. What error? You're on the verge of dying. The error, Bumpy replied deliberately, lies in assuming I'm solo. The 12 barrels remained fixed on him, but uncertainty crept in, a flicker of unease. Tommy darted a look toward the stairs. Empty. He faced Bumpy again, bluffing. Bumpy cracked his first smile. Then fire. No one pulled the trigger. For Dutch Schultz, his crew remained oblivious to one truth. Bumpy Johnson had been battling from... He'd been just 10 years old back in Charleston, South Carolina, prior to relocating to Harlem. Street brawls, jailhouse uprisings, battles for turf. They'd all taught him a lesson few guys ever grasped. Aggression follows a beat of its own. And at that moment, down in the cellar, Bumpy dictated the tempo. Tommy's grip squeezed the trigger. Final warning. Bumpy shifted. No one could quite piece together the rest later. The lone witness's account came out muddled and broken. Still, this much is clear. Bumpy skipped reaching for a weapon. He lunged toward the bulb instead. A single strike. The dangling light exploded. Pitch black followed, then pandemonium. Initial blasts rang out blindly in frenzy. Guys firing at phantoms, at noises. Tommy yelled, quote, 2. Yet panic ignores commands. Amid the gloom, Bumpy transformed. That space was familiar territory. He'd gambled cards there countless times, memorized each box, each surface, each nook. The Dutch's crew lacked that edge. You heard them drop one after another, not from bullets. Bumpy conserved ammo. He wielded his fists, exploited their disarray, capitalized on how they turned guns on themselves in the hysteria. A cry pierced the air. A form slumped to the ground. Another shot echoed. Another wail. Tommy attempted to regroup them. The staircase. Head for the staircase. But Bumpy had beaten them to it. The mayhem endured perhaps 3 minutes. 3 minutes that dragged like 3 hours. Then quiet descended, when somebody upstairs at last cracked open the cellar entrance, allowing illumination to flood the steps. This is what greeted them. 11 corpses. Not everyone lifeless, but all felled. Fractured limbs, injuries from errant shots by allies, out cold, hemorrhaging, and a solitary figure slumped against the partition on the floor, breathing in ragged gasps, pistol clutched in trembling fingers. Marty Icepick Delaney, the sole alert survivor. Bumpy had slipped away, evaporated like mist. Marty Delaney dragged himself up those stairs. It consumed 20 minutes. Each ascent brought torment, cracked ribs, possibly graver damage. He reached the pavement just as dawn broke, hailed a taxi using crimson-stained cash. Bronx, he wheezed. Arthur Avenue, Dutch Schultz's base. 8:17 a.m. Marty lurched into Dutch's gathering spot. Dutch sat midway through his morning meal, eggs, bread, java, perusing the daily paper. He glanced up, spotted Marty drenched in gore, and froze. Where's the rest? Marty couldn't utter words initially, merely shook his head. Are my crew gone? Marty eventually murmured. Every last one. He spared me. Dutch rose deliberately. He did what? He spared me to relay a warning. The whole space fell silent. Dutch's enforcers, his bookkeepers, his guards. Everyone halted, observed. What's the warning? Dutch's tone chilled like frost. Marty fumbled inside his coat. Dutch's crew drew weapons, but Marty extracted just one item. A playing card. The ace of spades, smeared with blood. He set it before Dutch on the surface. He instructed me to inform you. Harlem isn't up for grabs, and if you dispatch additional forces, bring extra cards. He's building a full set. Dutch Schultz gazed at that card endlessly. His subordinates anticipated the command, awaited Dutch to ignite fury, to unleash 50 soldiers to raise Harlem. Rather, Dutch lifted the card, examined it, then grinned. Not joyfully, but with reluctant acceptance. The guy's got nerve. Credit where due. Boss, we can't allow this. Dutch silenced him with a gesture. Ever consider the price of clashing with a fighter unafraid of death? One sharper than you. One backed by a whole district? Wu shook his head. It demands total ruin. And why bother? For gambling, profits. Simpler fortunes exist. He tossed the card into the ashtray, set it ablaze. We're pulling out of Harlem. Hand it to Bumpy Johnson. The choice stunned the assembly. Dutch Schultz, who'd battled Lucky Luciano, who'd eliminated his own allies, who'd never yielded, now yielding. The reason? Bumpy had achieved what even Dutch admired. He'd shown readiness to perish for his beliefs. And such individuals, you don't challenge them. You eliminate them outright or steer clear. Dutch couldn't eliminate him. Decades on, during the 1970s, a journalist located a former Cotton Club staffer and probed for the real events of that evening. The elder chuckled. Seeking the facts, Bumpy had company. How so? 4 associates waited upstairs throughout. They secured the cellar from the exterior after Dutch's team descended, sealed them inside. Bumpy could have slain all 12 had he chosen, yet he deliberately released one, because Bumpy grasped a key truth. Slaughtering Dutch's soldiers would ignite conflict. Shaming them concluded it. Legend or reality, certainty eludes us. What holds firm? Post that evening, Dutch Schultz never dispatched another soul to Harlem. Bumpy Johnson ascended as Harlem's unchallenged ruler of the shadows. For the ensuing 35 years, he safeguarded that community as kin. Not through reckless brutality, but via cunning, insight, and honor. And that ace of spades, Bumpy retained it, mounted it, displayed it in his workspace. A testament. Respect demands seizure, not bestowal. February 14th, in 1933, 12 guys stepped into a basement, but only one came back out, and Harlem's world flipped upside down forever. If this tale grabbed you, go ahead and pound that subscribe button. We're uncovering the Bumpy Johnson tales that history buried deep, those key incidents that built his mythic status, the principles that kept him beyond reach. Hit like if you're convinced Bumpy was Harlem's sharpest mind. Down in the comments, spill. What move would you make if you stepped into Dutch Schultz's place? Fresh epic yarns dropping tomorrow. Stay locked in.